So we're going to start with chapter 9 and hopefully make it through chapter 10 today. So could I get somebody to read?
Oh no, I don't know how to pronounce that name.
We don't care. Verses 1 through 14.
1 through 14.
Yeah.
Okay. In the first year of Darius, son of Ashurus, by birth a Mede, who became king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, perceived in the books the number of years that, according to the word of the Lord to the prophet Jeremiah, must be fulfilled for the devastation of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. Then I turned to the Lord to seek an answer by prayer and supplication with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. I prayed to the Lord my God and made confession, saying, Ah, Lord, great and awesome God, keeping covenant and steadfast love with those who you love and keep your commandments. We have sinned and done wrong, acted wickedly and rebelled, turning aside from your commandments and ordinances. We have not listened to your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings, our princes, and our ancestors, and to all the people of the land. Righteousness is on your side, O Lord, but open shame as at this day falls on us, the people of Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and all Israel, those who are near and those who are far away, in all the lands to which you have driven them, because of the treachery that they have committed against you. Open shame, O Lord, falls on us, our kings, our officials, and ancestors, because we have sinned against you. To the Lord our God belong mercy and forgiveness, for we have rebelled against him, and have not obeyed the voice of the Lord our God by following his laws, which he set before us, his servants, the prophets. All Israel has transgressed your law and turned aside, refusing to obey your voice. So the curse and the oath written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, have been poured out upon us because we have sinned against you. He has confirmed his word, which he spoke against us, against our rulers, by bringing upon us a calamity so great that what has been done against Jerusalem has never before been done under the whole heaven. Just as it is written in the law of Moses, all this calamity has come upon us. We did not entreat the favor of the Lord our God, turning from our iniquities and reflecting on his fidelity. So the Lord kept watch over this calamity until he brought it upon us. Indeed, the Lord our God is right in all that he has done, for we have disobeyed his voice.
Okay.
It was repetitive.
Yeah. And is somebody willing to read the rest of it, verses 15 through 27?
I'm here now. I can do it.
Okay, welcome.
Keep our routine going.
Yep.
And now, O Lord our God, who brought your people out of the land of Egypt with a mighty hand and made your name renowned even to this day, we have sinned, we have done wickedly. O Lord, in view of all your righteous acts, let your anger and wrath, we pray, turn away from your city Jerusalem, your holy mountain. Because of our sins and the iniquities of our ancestors, Jerusalem and your people have become a disgrace among all our neighbors. And now, therefore, O our God, listen to the prayer of your servant and to his supplication. And for your own sake, Lord, let your face shine upon your desolated sanctuary. Incline your ear, O my God, and hear. Open your eyes and look at our desolation in the city that bears your name. We do not present our supplication before you on the ground of our righteousness, but on the ground of your great mercies. O Lord, hear. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, listen and act and do not delay. For your own sake, O my God, because your city and your people bear your name. While I was speaking and was praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God on behalf of the holy city of my God. While I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I have seen before in a vision, came to me in a swift flight on the time of the evening sacrifice. He came and said to me, Daniel, I have now come out to give you wisdom and understanding. At the beginning of your supplications, a word went out, and I have come to declare it, for you are greatly beloved. So consider the word and understand the vision. 70 weeks are decreed for your people and your holy city, to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, and to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. Know therefore and understand, from the time that the word went out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the time of an anointed prince, there will be 7 weeks, and for 62 weeks it shall be built again with streets and moat, but in a troubled time. And after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing, and the troops of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. He shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall make sacrifice and offering cease, and in their place shall be an abomination that desolates until the decreed end is poured out upon the desolator.
What an uplifting passage. Okay, Daniel 9 stands out from the other parts of the book for at least 3 reasons. In the first place, its point of departure is neither a direct encounter of a threat or a dream or a vision by one of the principal characters of the book. Rather, the story begins with reflection of what's in the books. A suggestion is often made that one might skip the prayer entirely and move from verse 3 to verse 20, and that because the narrative would read better without the prayer. Some interpreters maintain that they should just leave it out, that it was added later. Furthermore, the language of the prayer is at odds with the rest of the chapter. The rest of the chapter is written in what Sal calls inelegant Hebrew, yet the prayer is much more eloquent, more elegant Hebrew. It doesn't have Aramaisms in it the way the rest of the book did. The author quite conceivably might have drawn substantially on existing prayers or even adapted an older prayer for this context. An argument may be made that the prayer of confession is integral to the chapter, however, for Daniel perceived the words of Jeremiah. Indeed, that prayer is the very sign that Daniel had understood Jeremiah following that prophecy. He urged, when you search for me, you will find me. If you seek me with all your heart, I will let you find me, and I will bring you back to the place from where I've sent you in exile. The promise of restoration is indeed contingent upon the right response to God, a response that Daniel takes up in the prayer. The chapter thus cannot be properly understood apart from the prayer of confession. So some people say, take out the prayer, it reads better. Our commentator says, no, the whole point of the chapter is about the prayer. He goes on and says that even today, we tend to like spontaneous prayer.
Mhm.
But when you are in anguish, when you are anguished in your soul, that sometimes you don't have the words to pray. In fact, if you pay attention to David Finnegan Hosey's Sunday morning prayers, he ends them with a phrase that says something about, even when we don't have the words to pray, our spirit reaches up Kathy, can you do a better job of what these words are? Because I really like the way he does that.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about because I was in the early service and that phrasing, but the words exactly won't come to mind. But basically, it's that you don't have to. I interpret it as him saying, "Hey, even when we can't get the words together, we know that we are connected to you, that you are there for us, and that our presence with you is
Yes,
enough."
right. And that God knows what we need to say, even if we can't say it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
God
that,
knows what we need.
yeah, and that's kind of the case here. And when we can't come up with words, sometimes we fall back on communal prayers. And in today's world, it's frequently the Lord's Prayer because many Christians, I'd like to think most Christians, know it by heart. So if they can't think of something, they just say the Lord's Prayer over and over.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of does the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then for the Catholics, there are the rosary
Mm-hmm.
is a prayer process. Praying the rosary is a prayer process that can do that as well. Fills a similar need.
Right. It is thought, at least Sal thinks that, remember in a previous chapter, Daniel got in trouble for praying. And Sal wonders if this is the prayer he got in trouble for praying.
Well,
No way to
when
know, but say that again, Harold.
when I was read through that, I was thinking to myself, in today's world, like you just said, we like to just make up prayers as we go, and I've always felt so inadequate with that. And I've looked at these prayers thinking, oh, if I could just come up with all these wonderful words, then to find that there maybe corporate prayers makes me feel a little better, because they weren't making it up as they go and sound so wonderful, So I was happy to hear that maybe when he does the 3 times a day, faces Jerusalem and prays, he may just be using a corporate prayer, not some wonderful thing he's coming up with himself.
Oh, good point.
One time when I was teaching Sunday school some years ago, we focused on the Lord's Prayer and did that repetitively, thinking about each word, a different word each time. And so I think sometimes these corporate prayers, I guess you call them, if you do that, it becomes a mantra. And maybe today, a certain part of that prayer speaks to you differently than tomorrow, another part speaks to you, because it's whatever you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I found that as I gotten older, I have less need to pray with words. That
Yes.
that it's okay.
By
Just
music.
yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. Music is praying. Who was it? Augustine said, I just learned this recently, that music is praying twice. Is a way to pray twice. So yeah.
Except for some rap songs.
Got that right.
True. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I've heard folks talk about going to, younger folks going to U2 concerts, the band U2 with Bono and stuff, and coming out feeling like they had been to church. That for them, so much of that U2's music is has a very strong spiritual quality to it. So anyhow, we digress.
Yeah, I mean, they've always been very strong in their faith and in their profession of that. And I actually knew someone years ago who met Bono and went to Pizza Hut with them, and they sat and talked about Christianity and how they were going to use music to change the world. And it was a very, very long time ago, but they've always been grounded in that.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't heard a whole lot since about 1500 liturgical music that, spoke to me.
I enjoy on Sunday mornings, I get up and I ask Alexa, and I've got several religious channels and what have you that I ask her to play. So to me, that's just part of my Sunday morning ritual, is hearing that music from what I can find on Alexa.
Yeah.
Okay. The Hebrew text here does not indicate the direct object of Daniel's quest. Our assumption is he's turning to God to seek an answer. More likely, he is seeking God in earnest prayer, which he does with fasting and with sackcloth and ashes. And those symbols are of profound sorrow. They're also associated with penitence. Such rituals are more broadly associated with people in desperate straits, people in need of divine mercy. In fact, in Psalm 35, the psalmist fasts and put on sackcloth in order to pray for the sick. Fasting and sackcloth are associated with fervent prayer and perhaps with grief for those in pain. So Daniel is quite serious about this. The main issue is not the confusion over the reliability of Jeremiah's prophecy of 70 years. Daniel is not seeking an answer, but God. So Daniel's is just seeking God. He's not trying to say, what's going on? You promised us this and you haven't delivered. We were supposed to be out of bondage by now. That's not what he's doing. Daniel understood Jeremiah properly, for the prophet had spoken of devastation and exile for the punishment of sins. So this is a prayer of confession and expressing contrition for communal sins. So Daniel's saying, we still are messing up. We're still doing wrong, and continues to ask for God's forgiveness rather than saying, hey, this is not what you promised us. Okay. I already talked about that. The prayer begins by assuming God's power to deliver and God's sovereignty over the whole universe. And the paradox is that God's power and sovereignty is on the one hand, and God's faithfulness as a covenant partner on the other. And those two things together form the basis for the prayer. The text moves from the characterization of God to the characterization of God's people. And talking about the manifold guilt of the people stands in contrast to the covenant faithfulness of God. And this goes on, throughout the Bible. We love you, we're sorry, we've screwed up, we won't do it again. And yet we keep doing it again.
It continues through today.
Yes, to this very second. Hope, if any, can come only on account of God's steadfast love, mercy, will to forgive, fidelity, and righteousness. Yet God's righteousness does not condemn unrighteous sinners forever. On the contrary, God's righteousness is manifested in mercy. The righteousness of God thus reflects God's will to do what is right for humanity, whatever the cost may be. So God will punish us. He allowed Israel to be taken into exile. He allowed Antiochus Epiphanes to desecrate the temple. But eventually God says, okay, you've been punished enough, and restores his people to right relationship. And so some of this justifies God's role in the destruction and the exile. At the same time, however, it offers a word of hope to all who would return to God through a genuine repentance of their ways. So again, it goes back over the same thing frequently. Daniel's prayer recontextualizes Deuteronomy's theology, as it were, so that it applies not only to the distraught exiles of the 6th century, but also to the Jews of the time of Antiochus Epiphanes in the 2nd century. The theology is for those who are far away, but equally for those who are near. The text reads as if the narrator has turned aside in the middle of the prayer to provide commentary for the reader, and that draws the reader into the prayer. Any comments so far?
I was trying to calculate, because at first I thought when Babylon was destroyed, that the exile was over. And some people measure that because that was like 70 years.
Yeah.
But then it continues going on. Daniel's still there through the rulers that came and took over Babylon. And
Yes.
so it said that among those who accept a tradition, Jeremiah, that the exile lasted 70 years, some choose the dates of 608 to 538, others from 586 to 516, that it ended when the temple was rebuilt in Jerusalem.
Yes.
So when did they get to go back? When were they released?
It's somewhere in there.
Yeah. Somewhere.
Well, but after after this, Cyrus of Persia comes along and undoes Darius of the Mede.
Mhm.
And so when Cyrus comes in, and what was it, 536?
Yeah, because the dates we have are from the Babylonian records.
Yeah. But Cyrus is the one that allows them to go back and restore the temple. So Cyrus isn't here yet.
Right.
But the Median continuation of the exile, I think, was so short, we tend not to remember about it.
Well, and for a group of people that have been somewhere 70 years, they don't remember Israel. I mean, they're not going to just jump up and run home the minute someone says you can go. I mean, there's probably a large part of them that is a diaspora that stays there. You know, if you think about
Yeah.
the reality. And it was Nehemiah that came along to let them back, right, and then rebuilt Jerusalem. So it's not in one day it's over.
Mhm.
It's a process.
All right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was 70 years or 92 years.
Yeah. And Sal makes the comment that, lots of people have done lots of numerical calculations to prove or to say when something happened, and there's no way to be precise about it. It's just, we love being precise in the 21st century because we've got all this high technology. So it just, it's in our blood.
Well, and they thought in symbols more than we do. I mean, 70, does that not just mean in God's perfect time?
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
70.
So they were there until God thought it's time to come home. I mean,
Yeah, when it's
70.
right, it'll happen.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seven times seven, or seven's used a lot.
Yeah. What's the movie, The Marigold Hotel, where the guy says,
Mm-hmm.
it'll all be right in the end, and if it's not right, it's not the end.
Yeah, that's right.
I like that philosophy. Okay, the response to Daniel comes swiftly. The text is emphatic that it comes even while he is still praying and confessing. And the response is the man Gabriel, who he has met before. Sal makes the point that God's nature seems to be responsive to human pleas even before they are fully articulated, simply because of God's love and dire human needs. This chapter reinterprets the prophecy of Jeremiah, perhaps in the light of the view expressed in Leviticus 26:18, that if the people continue to sin, God will continue to punish them sevenfold, 7 times 70 years. And then it goes into the all of that numerology. According to Gabriel's interpretation, the period has been decreed in order to allow for several objectives to be met. The first is to finish the transgression. You're not finished, this problem isn't finished. We got to let it play out. To put an end to sin, to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both the vision and the prophet, which means that they are true, that this is real, and to anoint a most holy place. So God's letting this play out in human time. The final objective, arguably, is the climax of them all is the anointing of the most holy place. The term here is literally Holy of Holies, which was the way that the inner sanctum of the temple was described. And then he goes into some detail about all those numbers. And if you're interested, you can read that. Susan has summarized it well. And there is some comparison that the end is coming with a flood, which recalls the destruction of the world back in Genesis, because people had gotten just so awful that God decided to wipe them all off the face of the earth. So at some point, God will finally pour out the decreed end on the desolator. Okay, so that's chapter 9 in a nutshell.
I have a question I wanted to ask the group. Your reactions where in the prayer he says, like, for your sake, God, I think you ought to do this. Like in verse 17, oh God, oh our God, listen to the prayer of your servant and supplication. And for your own sake, Lord, let your face shine upon your desolated sanctuary. I think there was at least another place where he said, well, for your own sake. Sometimes that is like, aren't we being a little audacious there to say, well, God, I think you ought to do this for your own sake. So I wonder how it struck other folks, if I'm just reading that wrong or.
No, I agree. It did sound a little cheeky.
A little cheeky.
But that concept is used throughout the Old and New Testament, and as one translation goes, it points out, for your glory, do this, and if you think about it, I think Christ even said, let your glory be magnified in this act. It's a concept that I've seen throughout the Old Testament and New. It's, if you'll do this, it will show how powerful you are, your glory will be shown, and that type of thing. So I'm wondering if that's the Hebrew way, that part of the prayer was written in ancient Hebrew, a formal Hebrew. So I'm wondering if it was a different way of saying, so that you might be magnified, so that your glory, your power, or blah, 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 will be shown. I don't know.
That makes sense, Harold. Okay.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
My brain is not working this morning. Could somebody tell me, please, in plain English, what Gabriel said? Because I don't know. It sounded pretty dismal to me. Like, there's more crap coming. But I mean, what was the message that Gabriel gave them? You're going to get out of jail free, or you're screwed. Please, somebody translate it for me.
Well, neither. It's, we're not done with you yet.
So more suffering to come.
More suffering is to come, but it will end in God's good time.
Yeah, Daniel, I have now come out to give you wisdom and understanding. That's the first thing Gabriel says. So I guess it's like, You got a process to go through.
And then he became clear as mud.
Right.
Well, yeah. If this were clear, we wouldn't be sitting
Yeah.
here.
And the last verse, and on the wing of the temple he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. Who's he talking about?
Most likely Antiochus Epiphanes, who was
Okay,
The guy
so
who
he's talking about this is what's going to happen to the people that are persecuting you now.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
guy who made him eat pork, right?
Okay,
well,
okay.
not just eat pork, the guy who
Desecrated the whole temple.
Yeah,
right, who offered pork
Who
on
ate
the
pork in
altar.
the temple.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, it's like Antiochus Epiphanes. We have to keep remembering he's the unnamed character in this book. You know, there's his Antiochus and his actions with the Jewish people, throughout that part of the world is the unnamed character, the unnamed person. The commentators name him, but he's not really brought out in Daniel. I don't think he's named specifically, but the symbolism.
Yeah. There are a
Okay.
lot of he's in here. I need a proper noun, please.
Well, I remember so well when we were going, or I think I do, over the Maccabees and all. It was the Maccabees that threw him out, right, in 164, and that's when they rededicated the temple. What, Claire? What is the Jewish holiday for the re-sanctification of the temple? Which one is that?
I'm sorry, Harry, Harold, where they what with the temple?
They re-sanctify it. They throw that guy out and they, kind of clean the temple and make it holy again. That's a big holiday. It happened in 164 BC. The Maccabees, I think, were the ones that overran him and got that going. But it's a big Jewish holiday, and I can't remember which one it is.
I honestly don't know. I have often said, Harold, when I need history of the Jewish people, I ask you.
Well,
Teamwork.
we will remain in the dark.
okay.
I'll
Any
ask Siri.
Yeah, that's how I learn lots of stuff.
A fine Jewish girl.
Well, my Siri is actually a man. And Tom Siri is Australian.
Irish.
Irish. Oh, Irish, I'm sorry.
Right now.
Okay. Moving on to chapter 10. This is shorter, so we may actually get through this. Who would like to read verses 1 through 9?
I will.
Okay.
In the 3rd year of King Cyrus of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belshazzar. The word was true, and it concerned a great conflict. He understood the word, having received understanding in the vision. At that time, I, Daniel, had been mourning for 3 weeks. I had eaten no rich food, no meat or wine had entered my mouth, and I had not anointed myself at all for the full 3 weeks. On the 24th day of the 1st month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris, I looked up and saw a man clothed in linen with a belt of gold from Upaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words were like the roar of a multitude. I, Daniel, alone saw the vision. The people who were with me did not see the vision, though a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled and hid themselves. So I was left alone to see this great vision. My strength left me, and my complexion grew deathly pale, and I retained no strength. Then I heard the sound of his words, and when I heard the sound of his words, I fell into a trance, face to the ground. How far?
No, that's it. Kathy, can you finish it?
Yep. But then a hand touched me and roused me to my hands and knees. He said to me, Daniel, greatly beloved, pay attention to the words that I am going to speak to you. Stand on your feet, for now I have been sent to you. So while he was speaking this word to me, I stood up trembling. He said to me, do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia opposed me 21 days. So Michael, out of the chief princes, came to help me, and I left him there with the prince of the king of Persia, and have come to help you understand what is to happen to your people at the end of the days. For there is a further vision of those days. While he was speaking these words to me, I turned my face toward the ground and was speechless. Then one in human form touched my lips, and I opened my mouth to speak and said to the one who stood before me, my Lord, because of the vision, such pains have come upon me that I retain no strength. How can my Lord's servant talk with my Lord? For I am shaking, no strength remains in me, and no breath is left in me. Again, one in human form touched me and strengthened me. He said, do not fear, greatly beloved, you are safe. Be strong and courageous. When he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me.
Okay. Sal says that this passage is really a prologue of a much longer extending unit that goes through the rest of the book. As we have come to expect, this starts with a chronological notice, the third year of the reign of King Cyrus of Persia that we were talking about a few minutes ago. So Daniel is there in Babylon, but the Babylonians have already been conquered. Jewish exiles should not have been repatriated. The Jewish exiles should have been repatriated to Palestine 2 years earlier to begin the restoration of the temple. Yet, as one learns from the preceding chapter, the desolation is not over. Even in the restoration period and beyond, the Jews remain a captive people, and Daniel's captive name, Belshazzar, is a reminder of that fact. The vision is the message, the word of the Lord. This vision that Daniel describes is not a wild fantasy of a deranged person.
No.
The reference is to the period when the Jews were still, even after the restoration of the Persians, they're still in desolation. And he mourns, this is something that was a little unusual. Daniel mourns for 3 weeks, where it was much more typical to mourn for 3 days. And this 3-week period even included Passover. So he did not celebrate Passover. He was so intent on his praying and fasting.
Oh, so we know it's Passover because he was talking about the 24th day of the first month.
Right.
Did the author imply that Passover was not celebrated while they were in Babylon? Did I misread that, or?
My memory of it is more that even though they had been allowed to go, they'd been freed to go back to Jerusalem, that Antiochus Epiphanes was the one that said, you can't celebrate. I'm not real sure the Babylonians refused to let them do it. I think it was, my understanding from what I remember is that Antiochus Epiphanes, who was in Jerusalem at the temple, was the one that forbid them to do that. Because remember, not all of the Israelites were taken into captivity.
Mm-hmm.
It was the upper crust. So you still got people in Jerusalem, but it was the really bad guy that wouldn't let them do it. So Daniel is really serious about what's going on here. So he sees a being clothed in bright linen, which is a sign of holiness, and also girded with a belt or a sash made from gold. And the Uphaz is an exotic region renowned for its gold. I'd never heard of it before. The rest of the description is like gleaming stone, lightning, flaming torches, and it all suggests a supernatural presence. The text is very emphatic that Daniel alone saw the vision, but the people around him knew something was going on and they all ran and hid.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't clear to me. I don't know if y'all got something out of this. Was, in seeing the vision, did Daniel appear to have a fit or something? Or was there an earthquake or, a solar eclipse? What did they see or feel that caused them to go, I need to be out of here?
Yeah. Yeah. I wondered that too, if there was, because Daniel gets overwhelmed when he has these visions. He was pretty calm and cool when he was interpreting other people's visions, but when he had his own.
Yeah, he falls to, and maybe that was it. Maybe they thought he was having a fit, which to them would have, been an indication of some evil spirit taking over him, because he does frequently fall on the ground with his face to the ground, and his interpreter has to help him up. So maybe that was it.
Yeah, my strength left me, my complexion grew deathly pale, and I retained no strength. So
Yeah, they may just have looked at him and went, nope, we can't help you.
It could have been that he hadn't had a bath in 3 weeks. That might have had something to do with it.
Why do we accept these stories and these visions and people taking the form or spirits taking the form of a human when we read all of this? But if I told you that today, you'd be committing me to an asylum.
well, no, we wouldn't, unless you were threatening to kill others or kill yourself. But that's what the law says.
Hey.
I've got several books on
Having the
my
vision.
bookshelf. I've got several books on my bookshelf about human interaction with angels in our current, they're 20 or 30 years old, but in our current day, people have had interactions with angels that can be explained no other way.
And also, I can recall several instances in my life where I have had a very brief interaction with someone that turned out to be very significant, and that person was not part of my life, but for a very short time.
Yeah, so Bud, we will believe you.
Well, Bud and my sister outlaw, they were both in Williamsburg, and they were walking along the street, and all of a sudden both of them just stared at each other and they said, "What just happened?" And you'll have to explain it, Bud.
Well, we were by what used to be Casey's store, which became the bookstore for the college there. And we were just walking down the street, and all of a sudden it just had this weird feeling, and it got kind of cold, and it was almost like we stepped through a door. And we just stopped, and both of us just stopped and looked at each other. And we weren't talking about that. We were just talking. And it was a very weird experience.
So you never know, what these people felt and might have felt at that same time. And the holiday is Hanukkah.
That's what I thought, that it might have been Hanukkah. The 8 days.
Yeah, commemorating the recovery of Jerusalem and subsequent rededication of the Second Temple at the beginning of the Maccabean revolt.
All right.
Thank you, Siri.
Okay, upon hearing the sound of the divine being speaking, he falls into his trance, yet manages to maintain a posture of worship. And he's still trembling, but he receives assurance, do not fear. His earnest quest to gain understanding has been favorably received, and the angel has come to him on account of his words, supposedly his prayer. And then Sal goes on and talks about how at that time it was believed that every country had its own otherworldly military commander. And Michael was one of those for Israel. And Michael was delayed in getting there because he was fighting with some of the other angels for other nations and protecting the people of God. So it's a concept that every nation, this is an old Near Eastern belief, that every nation has a celestial patron, and the divine council consists of these celestial beings representing different various nations. Such a view is reflected also elsewhere in the Bible. And so they believed that there was a council, and God was part of this council. And it's just that the Israelites were supposed, even though they believed those other beings existed, that God was their being and he was the only one they were to visit or to worship. Domination in the divine council was something that had to be achieved again and again. The deity who takes the place at the head of that council is by necessity a divine warrior, a god who fights against the other deities and becomes victorious again and again. Chaos is a persistent threat in the cosmos and is kept in abeyance only through the intervention of the ever-vigilant and benign divine warrior. This mythic worldview lies in the background of much of the Old Testament understanding of God, who is known by the common epithet of a divine warrior, the Lord of hosts. So the Israelites believed that God was always intervening on their behalf. Daniel's reaction is one of utter awe. He puts his face to the ground as he had previously done and becomes speechless. And Sal remembers Jeremiah and Moses, who also became speechless, and also Isaiah. His first utterance upon his recovery of speech is an outright admission of his debility in the face of the anguish of his vision. He's completely drained of his strength and he's out of breath. So Daniel is touched again for the third time. First, it had been a mysterious hand, then by someone with the semblance of a human form, and now by one like the appearance of a mortal. And we don't know if it's the same person that touched him before. The Hebrew terms are a little bit different. Even so, a divine being is clearly meant. Daniel is told again not to fear. He is earnestly encouraged to be strong. So Daniel needed to be properly assured, mentally prepared, and otherwise fortified to receive the revelation that is to come next.